Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Spannerman again here with another video. Hope you enjoyed the video today. Please subscribe to the channel. Any comments, thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Spannerman again here with another video. Today we're just going to briefly talk about how to dry your timber out when you cut it. So normally for me, I'll tell you my way, it may be different for you, but for the beginners out there that are not too sure, we'll just go over a few things. First of all, I live in Australia and we have eucalyptus, which is really hard wood. A lot of people favour the red gum. I prefer the ironbark over the red gum because it burns a lot hotter, and it's my favourite, as well as the grey box. Now, when you cut timber, it starts to dry out immediately through the end grain. It'll dry between, depends on the species of trees, but it can dry anywhere from 10 times to 15 times faster through the end grain than what it actually dries on the outside. So when we look at a piece of timber like this that's got the bark removed, it's nice and smooth, whereas the end grain is a little bit more porous, so it loses the moisture, as I said, between 10 and 15 times faster. So I cut this only yesterday, and it's going to lose moisture very, very rapidly compared to the other side. When I measured the other side the other day, I think I had about could have been around 10% moisture, and the inside was around about 14%. So yeah, it was only 4 or 5% difference. But this piece of timber is about 2 years old, so we'll just check it again. We'll put the probe in there. So this is a still moisture meter. Turn it on. 14%. There it is there. You can see that 14%. Now we'll turn it over the other side. 7%. There it is there, 7%. I think you can see. We'll just turn that on again. There it is, 8%. So quite a bit of difference, 14% to 8%. You'll notice that there's all cracks here. And there was cracks on the other end of it as well before I cut it. So we've got cracks on this side, yet you've got no cracks on that side. Reason being, as what I just mentioned before, that the moisture escapes on the end grain 10 to 15 times faster than it does on the outside of the timber. So therefore, all the stresses cause pressure on the timber, and that's why it cracks, through stress cracking. But as you can see, that this piece of timber is over a year, maybe a year and a half old, and you've got still a large difference between the moisture on the outside and the moisture on the inside. So therefore, if you go out and buy yourselves one of these moisture gauges, there's no point just going to the outside of the timber and saying, oh, the timber's dry, the timber's dry. No, you need to cut it in half and measure it. Now, the reason I cut it in half and measured it yesterday was because I was just checking to see that the timber behind me, how dry it was, because I'm starting to use it. Now, the timber behind me, I've got 3 places how I store timber. I do store it in this little wood shed. So I've got 2 wood sheds. The one over here holds about 15 cubic meters. It goes back about 3 meters, and the smaller one holds about 10 cubic meters, and same thing, it goes back about 3 meters. I've also got a large, about 20 cubic meters that is here, and I've also got storage at the back there as well. So I generally keep a total of about 40 cubic meters, about at least 3 to 4 years worth of timber. I probably only use about 8 to 10 cubic meters during winter. It depends on what the temperature's like over winter. Now, one thing about storing timber outside is that certain species of timber can make the bark rot. Now, grey box is notorious for the bark. If it gets all wet here, it starts to peel away and starts to rot, and can get even bugs in it. And yeah, it can really spoil the timber. Not a good idea to leave grey box out in the weather, and that's why you can see black plastic over here, because I've got grey box. It's half grey box. I use half grey box and half iron bark. The iron bark, which is this one here, it does not rot, or it does rot eventually, but certainly in a couple of years it won't rot. Now, the other thing is you can stack your timber this way. A lot of people might stack it 3 pieces that way, 3 pieces the other way, or slightly different, but to let the air get in there. And you know, you wouldn't have it as big as what I've got it here. You may have it on pallets, and you may have it in different areas, or some people like to stack it alongside a fence. If they're on a farm, they might just stack it along the fence, and that way the wind can blow through it and dry it out. That's not a bad way of doing it either. But if you've got this type of grey box on there, you really need to dry it under cover, because as I said, it gets if you get a wet winter, it's going to rot. And yeah, I've had quite a bit of that rotting happening with the grey box, so I tend to dry that under cover at the moment. Now, the other thing is, question is, I'm telling you 3 years, then, you know, someone might say, oh no, I can dry it in a year and a half. You have this piece of timber like this will dry out in 1 year. This piece of timber here could take a year and a half. So let's just say it's the start of the summer. Okay, this time next year it's going to be the start of summer again. So that's 1 year. So in a year and a half, it's going to get 2 summers. You get away with burning that, not a problem, in a year and a half, maybe slightly less than a year and a half. But as we start to get up around this size, you're going to start to head towards 2 years before it's dry. And when you get into bigger timber, it's going to take up to 3 years, and in some cases 4 years. It just depends on how big and how long it is and the diameter it is. So the bigger the timber, the much longer it's going to take. And that's why I use a moisture gauge, not because I'm interested how much moisture is on the outside. Yes, I am interested initially. So if I was going to use this timber, like an example is I'm using this timber now. So I've only started using this in the last month. So I grab my moisture gauge, I'll go up to a piece of timber, I'll look for a piece that's reasonably long, so, you know, at least a foot and maybe 6 inches in diameter, and then I'll put the moisture gauge in the middle, then I'll get the chainsaw and I'll cut it in half, and I'll measure the moisture gauge. I'll measure the moisture with the gauge on the inside. If it's only a couple of percent, then I know it's well and truly dry and it'll be perfect for burning. And that works really good. But when you're starting to get really big bits of timber, I started collecting bigger bits, which are over here. So some of the bits over there are a little bit bigger. Even if we look at bits like this over here, yeah, they're over a foot long, 6 inches in diameter. They're going to take 3 years. No question about that, yeah. The little ones like this, they're only going to take a year and a half, even get away with a year sometimes. Depends on the summer that you get. So just remember that. It depends on your timber that you're drying. An example would be if you had a little wood stove, a little small wood stove, and you only had small timber, you can get away with a year and a half. If you get up to 4-inch timber, you get away with 2 years. If you've got 6 inches and up to a foot in diameter, it's going to take 3 years, maybe even slightly longer. It depends on how you're going to dry it. One thing that some people do, and it's not the way that I do it, they'll go out into the forest or a designated area where you can get timber, or they know someone, and they'll cut the timber in long lengths, even up to say 2 meters in length. That's going to take a long time to dry, because especially in the middle, a meter in, it's going to be wet, because as I said, the outside of the timber breathes. In other words, it releases the moisture 10 to 15 times slower than the end grain. So the moisture escapes out of the end grain 10 to 15 times quicker, and that's where you get all the stresses and you get the splits. And the splits start from the outside and work their way in towards the center. and sometimes they can go along the full length of the timber, sometimes they don't. You can always tell if they've gone down the full length of the timber, because if you look at the split at one end and it matches at the other end, like an internal split. If we look at a split, if we were to look at a split like this, it's quite easy to see that it went right through, because the split goes right through like that. But the split veers off and it starts to resplit over here now. So the split, it's split in two different directions. So you can see it here, and then it's split on this side in a slightly different spot. So timber can split all over the place. There's no rule to it. It just depends on the stress and the forces, and you know, whether this bit of timber was facing the sun all summer or whether it was down below mixed in with some other. So yeah, timber splits all over the place. There's no rule for it. Look, I hope this helps. It's just a bit of a brief introduction about how to store timber. I store it my way, undercover. 3 years does the job for me. As I said, if you want to use it quicker, you need smaller bits. What some people do is that they split it. I've got a hydraulic splitter, so yeah, I could split it much smaller. Problem with small timber is that you're going to burn through it much, much quicker. You're much better off having larger timber, 6 inches to 8 inches to put on your fire, so it burns overnight. You're nice big logs, longer, you know. So that's the difference between having a large fireplace or a large wood stove as opposed to a small one. So a small one's going to burn through a hell of a lot more timber than a bigger one. Look, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up. Bye for now.